This week on Case Studies with the Biz Doc, it's LinkedIn. I'm going to take you through the history, the venture capital. They were public for a while, then they were bought from Microsoft. All that history and more this week. LinkedIn. It all started way back in 2003 when this guy, Reid Hoffman, and a cast of characters out of, guess what, PayPal. Elon Musk came out of PayPal. Jack Dorsey came out of PayPal. There's a ton of people that came out of PayPal, and look where they are now. The story really starts back here in 2003, where Reid Hoffman went out and raised some money from Sequoia. About $4.7 million he raised from them, and it was pretty much a B2B play. As a matter of fact, at that time, 245 users at the end of 2003. By the way, that's not 245,000. That's not 245 million. This isn't the days of, social media going like this. This is the early days. 245 users. But it was primarily B2B accounts, if you think about it back then. So anyway, they raised 4.7 million from Sequoia in 2003, and then halfway through 2004, I think this was Greylock. They raised 10 million from Greylock. Series C raised 12.8. Bessemer was leading that. Finally, they get this $1 billion valuation in 2008 on a Series D where they raised 53 million, followed by an extension of Series D at 22.7 million. So this venture stage, they only raised 103.2 million. And when you compare that to any of the modern things like Snapchat or Uber or Lyft and everything, those people would raise $100 million a year to cover negative cash flow. Now, why didn't LinkedIn do it that way? Well, it's because they started making revenue through jobs postings in 2005, and they had about 1 million users. So you see, there's something interesting happening here. You didn't have vanity stats, and you didn't just have users for the sake of users. They actually were building a business from the get-go. And that's really not very much venture capital money they raised, especially when you compare it to Snapchat or TikTok or anything like that. They're raising hundreds of millions of dollars a year once they reach a certain mass of users that aren't paying. They're just using and posting videos and doing all the things that you do on Snapchat and TikTok. Well, that wasn't LinkedIn. So LinkedIn was driving here and got to 1 million total users and making revenue off jobs postings in 2005, and they've only raised $15 million. And it really shows you what Reid Hoffman was all about. As a matter of fact, right here, if you take a look at Reid Hoffman, he offers a fantastic podcast to listen to called Masters of Scale, where he talks about scaling businesses. And he knows what he's doing, and we can look right back here and see that he did. Now, in 2006, they added the public profile. Here we go. Now, business people like you and me, for free, could put a public profile in place, and then all of our friends and people in the business community could see it and see what was going on. Now you really had it not as social media as much as your resume online. And then you were able to actually comment and work with other things, and they kept adding features to that. By the end of 2007, 10 million users. By the end of 2008, 30 million users, and they offered the mobile version. So look at the methodical way that they went through to build LinkedIn up. And at this time, between 2007 and 2008, in that window, Reid Hoffman gave way to a new CEO named Dan Nye. Reid now stepping aside from his CEO duties as you've gone from this introductory phase, and the venture phase is almost over, and you're moving into next level professional leadership, although Reid is no slouch. Then in 2009, Jeff Weiner takes over for Dan Nye. Now, Jeff is very interesting because this is on the eve of going public. And take a look here. From 48 million users to 90 million users to 145 million users, a ton of money is being made. Also, it's very real, the revenue that's being generated. And so they have an IPO in 2011. So here's the venture phase. They've raised 103.2 million. They changed leadership a couple times, but it's not for the sake of crisis, it's for the sake of growth. And they were very methodical about adding, enhancing, and extending what was going on. But it's important to know at this time, the lion's share of LinkedIn revenue was related to jobs and recruiters. That's where the money was made. Recruiters could use LinkedIn as a place to fish and look for people that they were trying to recruit on contracts that they had with a company. Recruiter works with a company, company's going to pay the recruiter to find somebody, recruiter pays a large subscription fee to LinkedIn, larger even than the basic fees that you and I might pay for premium profiles for premium membership at LinkedIn, and they get the opportunity to send very large numbers of emails out, see a lot of detailed information, and reach out and recruit people for positions for their companies. And by the way, that is a way many people I've known have found their next gig and their next job, is recruiters working through LinkedIn, seeing their background, and there's so much more filtering that happens. Well, LinkedIn, the lion's share of the revenue at that time was from jobs. On the first day of going public, it went from 45 to 94. It was up 109% the first day it went public. Now, I happen to think that's not good, because I think this is once again the bank underpriced LinkedIn. LinkedIn should have gone out at 75 to 80. It goes out at 45. So all that money wasn't made by LinkedIn. LinkedIn only made the offering price. The Biz Doc's going to go through and talk about the pitfalls of IPOs one day, and to really describe how the investment banks sometimes aren't really in the best interest of the company going public. They're in the best interest of their ultra high net worth and their own coterie of customers that they are giving advance access through friends and family and more, and selling in. And those people are getting access to the IPO at the 45 price, and they're able to sell it within a week at 94 or within a day, when the rest of the shareholders that have come from the company that went public, they are actually in lockup periods that may last a year or more. So let's follow the users. 145 million users there in 2011, 202 million 2012, 277 million in 13, 347 million in 14, 415 million in 15, and 487 million in 16, and then 500 million here. Well, wow, that's sort of interesting, because 500 million users, you would think that that would be, you know, one afternoon for Facebook and Twitter at certain times when they were adding millions and millions of users. But what you have to remember with all this is B2B. These are people putting personal profiles up there. So this is 500 million business people, not every man, woman, and child who wants to have a Facebook or a Twitter account. It's different. And they're paying maybe $30 a month or so for premium profile. It gets them access to more things to help them do their job. So it's a very different form of social network, and one that was making money from the beginning. The public phase here went okay, and they were up there and they crossed $250 a share, like $30 billion in valuation or something like that. But then they had an earnings report right at the end of 15, early 16. Actually, I think it was Q1 of 16, where they announced spectacularly bad results compared to what people were asking for and expecting, and they dropped 43%, or $10 billion in one day. And there's a word for that, and that is damn. That is a hell of a drop. What that means is during the time that they were public, the guidance that they put out and having to catch up and give bad news, they were out of sync with each other. Plus, they had some business issues they were working on. Well, that was the signal time from Microsoft. This is a very good business, and whether they had an issue on revenue in a quarter with revenue reporting that went down or something doesn't really matter. Let's not think about that. Let's take a look at the value of 500 million business people that are, many of whom, the vast majority, are willing to pay a premium subscription to have their resume online, to read interesting business articles, and to be in touch with people that might be accessible for their next job. So there's a very good reason to be on LinkedIn, and it's not the number of likes that you get on Facebook, or the number of followers you get on Twitter, or the number of thumbs up or love messages you get on any of those platforms. This is all about your resume online, reading articles that are interesting, and seeing people talk about their business life, and maybe that's interesting to you to comment. It is a subset of life on social media. When this price goes down there in the beginning of 16, toward the end of 16, Microsoft came back and offered, I think it was $196 a share, which was $26.2 billion. What I love about 26.2, that's like the distance of a marathon, isn't it? Yep, see, the production people at Valuetainment, they know these things. So it does seem like that there'd been a marathon run, and that was basically a 14-year run to when Microsoft bought the company. And that sort of is a marathon. I think it's kind of coincidental that Microsoft's price was $26.2 billion. Now, there's something interesting that happens working for Microsoft or being part of Microsoft. They largely left LinkedIn alone. Why did they do that? Because there's some things that were happening right. Jeff Weiner was still there. He had suffered through this drop and everything, and he was still committed to the business, and you could hear him coaching the market and talking about the great things they were continuing to do and add to LinkedIn during this time. It was March of 17 or so when officially the deal closes and Microsoft buys LinkedIn. It's now a division of Microsoft. They were keeping us notified through the quarterly earnings reports about revenue. In 2017, it was $2.27 billion, growing to $5.26 billion, $6.75 billion, and now $8 billion in 2020. So in other words, Microsoft bought for $26 billion. It's something that's generating $8 billion in revenue. So Microsoft may have paid 10 times revenue, and that's not usually the way you buy things. You usually buy them on EBITDA or profit multiples. But now, not even 4 years into this, that's down to 3 times or less. So there's a lot of good things that were going on there, and Jeff Weiner was still driving it. Such as in 2019, Open for Business was put up there, which allowed freelancers to find gigs and things on LinkedIn. Now that's interesting because at the same time, you've got things like Upwork and Freelancer.com and other resources for editors, shooters, graphic artists, web designers, a lot of freelancers that are out there saying, I've got great business services, want to offer it. So LinkedIn kept offering that stuff and kept going. And finally, we come to the end of Jeff's tenure at the company as he gives way, becomes executive chairman, and Ryan Rolansky is now CEO or division president, if you're going to look at it that way. Let's really quick look at some lessons. I think there's some really interesting things that can apply to you and me, even though this became the business social network and is a real behemoth, the only behemoth in the space. First of all, you know, they've got B2B right, where they're helping recruiters, and it really became B2B, business to me, and I've invented that term. So they understood the market they were in and didn't panic and go elsewhere. Then vanity stats versus revenue. They could have grown this up hundreds of millions of users early, but they were focusing on revenue and the tools and things that would make sense. So I think that there was a wonderful resistance here to vanity stats, no, revenue, yes. And it's because it was data, data, data. And that's one of the things that I preach a lot, is that use data to make decisions about your business. Use data to make decisions about when you grow, who you add, what you're doing. And you may find out that you don't have to take as much venture capital or friends and family money or raise debt if that's what you're able to do. If it's an even smaller business and you're using your local business bank, for instance, and putting personal guarantees up. Data, data, where is it? Oh, data, data, data is where it's at. And so that, I think, is some important lessons for you and me. And you know I like to say it, whether you're running a t-shirt company in Berlin or you're running LinkedIn, data is your friend. And that is the compressed history of LinkedIn and where they went. I hope that was useful to you. That's what I think, but what do you think about LinkedIn? Leave me a comment down below. I answer as many as I can. And while you're there, subscribe to Valuetainment Economics and hit the bell to get notifications when there's more case studies and other great Valuetainment Economics content. And if you like this case study, check out one of these other ones from yours truly, the Biz Doc. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.